Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to Trump Watch. As I have been stating for a long time now, years, one of the big consequences of living under the national security state form of governmental structure and its deadly and destructive foreign policy of invasions, coups, assassinations, wars of aggression, and so forth, one in which multitudes of foreigners are killed. As Martin Luther King pointed out, this is the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. And one of the consequences has been, I contend, the mass killings of people here in the United States at the hands of what I call off-kilter people. That is, in a regular, normal society, one that doesn't live under a regime that is a death producer, a massive death producer, there's going to be off-kilter people, just kind of strange people in life. But they go about their business, and you can tell they're kind of strange. Something's off mentally about them, but they don't do any harm to anybody. But it's my contention that once America was converted into a national security state with a massive death machine, producing death all over the world, millions of deaths, that something triggers something going on in these off-kilter people that then motivates them to essentially engage in copycat killings. Now, one might say, no, Jacob, because they're killing people overseas and not Americans, and the off-kilter people are killing Americans. Well, in the mind of the off-kilter people, I mean, that's clearly a distinction that Americans draw, especially U.S. officials. But in the mind of the off-kilter people, they may not be able to make that distinction. They may just put the same value in human life, whether it's an American citizen or a foreign citizen, and say, well, if the U.S. government places no value in the lives of foreigners, which it clearly doesn't, the off-kilter people says, well, what's the difference? Killing people here, killing people over there. So there's sort of a dark, ironic, logical consistency in the mind of the off-kilter person. It's my conviction, and I've said this, in the last few months here, I said, that all this new massive spree of killing in the Caribbean, Venezuela, Iran now, with no remorse, no regret. It's all just sort of normalized, like these drug war killings in the Caribbean on the high seas. It's like nonchalant, we killed another group of people in a boat here. Really, what have they done? Oh, we suspected them of drug dealing. Oh, is that a death penalty offense? No, but we can kill them when we want. We got to win the war on drugs. It's been going on for decades. And killing these boat people is going to win the war on drugs? Oh, yeah, man, it'll help win the war on drugs. It's almost over. And then, the killing of people there in Iran. It's like, okay. I mean, they look on them like they looked on Vietnamese. Remember during the Vietnam War when they were killing millions of Vietnamese and they said, oh, they're gooks. Oh, they're just nothing more than gooks, it's just that mindset. And I said that as they entered onto this new spree of killing, you're going to see the reaction here. You see, the assumption's always been that as long as the killing took place over there and only of foreigners, that it wouldn't have any effect here at home. That Americans could go about their lives and they can go to work, vacations, go to the movie theater, watch Netflix, whatever, play with their dog, and no problem. You can just keep these two worlds apart. Just leave the national security state. Trust it. Delegate your conscience. Render your conscience into Caesar. They'll handle everything to keep us safe. And you can keep the two worlds apart. I've always said that's impossible. That inevitably, when you've got a death machine that makes the U.S. government the greatest purveyor of violence in the world, as Martin Luther King said, is going to seep into the very pores of the citizenry. Now, most people are able to handle it. They may disagree with what's going on, but they can express their frustrations to their friends or send a letter to the editor or write an op-ed or call into some internet podcast or whatever and express their sentiments. But the off-kilter people can't do that. something triggers in them. And I have no doubts that this guy falls in that category. Now, I don't think he's crazy like President Trump has said, but I think clearly he falls into the category of off kilter, if for no other reason than to think that he was going to break through these rings of security and be able to reach the president, way up near the stage. And he had a priority list that start with the president, work his way down. What? And what? Everybody's just going to be lying there and sitting there and waiting to be called up as far as the priority goes? I mean, this is what's called, to me, the classic definition of off kilter. But his motives are very interesting here. Let me go over those because they fall in the category of both personal and policy. It's very interesting to me. And on the personal side of this, he says, I'm no longer willing to permit a pedophile, rapist, and traitor to coat my hands with his crimes. And so it seems that he's referring to President Trump in that statement, but it's all off base here because Trump, he's clearly alluding to the Jeffrey Epstein matter, which of course was on the mind of everybody until the attack on Venezuela and the attack on Iran, which of course took the Epstein thing off the front pages. But the fact is that Trump was never convicted of pedophilia, never involved. There's no evidence that he was involved. But this guy clearly, in his off-kilter mind, reaches that conclusion. When he talks about a rapist, my hunch is that he's referring to the case of Jean Carroll versus Donald Trump, where they had litigation. She sued him for defamation, claiming that he had done certain things to her. And the jury came out and found that Trump had not raped her, that he had sexually abused her in some way, but that did not encompass rape. And but my hunch is that this guy can't, in his off-kilter mind, can't draw that distinction. And sure enough, Trump responds to these allegations and by lashing out at CBS News' Norah O'Donnell. This was in CBS's interview of Trump after what happened here, the assassination attempt. And she reads this statement, and he gets furious. And Trump is quoted as saying, I was waiting for you to read that because I knew you would, because you're horrible people, horrible people. Yeah, he did write that. I'm not a rapist. I didn't rape anybody. And O'Donnell interjects, oh, do you think he was referring to you? And the article says, but the president blew past her question, declaring I'm not a pedophile. Okay, well, he's not a rapist and he's not a pedophile. So the guy gets it all wrong in his off-kilter mind. But the article says Trump bristled at what he seemed to deem an insinuation about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, who was not mentioned by name in the manifesto or by O'Donnell. Then, quote, you read that crap from some sick person, the president said. I got associated with stuff that has nothing to do with me. I was totally exonerated. Well, he was exonerated of rape, but not of sexual abuse, because that case got upheld by the appellate court, Federal Court of Appeals. It's now on appeal to the Supreme Court. Trump has appealed it. They haven't yet ruled whether they're going to undertake the case. But Trump is correct. I mean, he had nothing to do with pedophilia. There's no evidence of it. Jury found that he didn't rape Jean Carroll. Now, I'm not sure what he means, what this off-kilter guy means by that he's a traitor. My hunch is that he's referring to foreign policy, that Trump is doing things in violation of the Constitution. But that's just speculation. Now, here's what another article says, though. Anticipating the criticism that the attack might not be in line with Christian teachings, the writing appears to refer to reports of abuse in immigration detention camps. Now we're moving in the area of policy. away from the personal stuff. The recent lethal attacks on boats in the Caribbean Sea and Eastern Pacific Ocean, and the bombing of an elementary school in Iran, among other things. Quote, turning the other cheek when someone else is oppressed is not Christian behavior, the writing reads. It is complicity in the oppressor's crimes. So what this guy is doing, he's taking things that he obviously disagrees with, condemns, like the killing of those little girls in that elementary school in Iran. What amounts to murder of these people on the high seas. And then the abuse of people in immigration camps. There is no question that all three things have occurred here, and that they are contemptible. They are evil. They are immoral. So he writes these things saying these are not consistent with Christian values. Now, he's trying to, I think, justify what his assassination attempt to his friends by saying that, okay, I understand that killing might not be in line with Christian values, but I want y'all to understand what I'm doing here, because to be passive in the light of when your government is violating Christian principle is not Christian. Now, Trump goes off and says the guy hates Christians, which I don't understand at all. I've tried to figure out what could Trump be referring to. I have read nothing that indicates this guy hates Christians. In fact, it seems to me the contrary. He's saying you're not supposed to turn the other cheek, as Jesus said, when your government's involved in very evil activity, anti-Christian activity. And from my perspective, libertarian perspective, there's no question that those killings on the high seas are evil. No question at all. And troops are obeying orders to commit murder. The drug war is not a death penalty offense. And our Constitution, our form of governmental structure, our criminal justice system, principles that go back to Magna Carta say you don't kill people. The government doesn't kill people until there has been due process. You arrest a person, you prosecute them, you charge them with a crime, you have a jury trial. Then and only then do you punish them if they're convicted. And you have to prove them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. They didn't do that. They're still not doing it with those people in those little boats. They're just saying, oh, we know they're doing this. We know they're guilty. We're going to go kill them. And there's people supporting this. The MAGA people support it. It's phenomenal. There's no conscience at all involved here. This is what I've been arguing about in my series, The Evil Within, which I would invite everyone to watch. That people have rendered their conscience unto Caesar. Remember, Jesus says, render unto God what is God, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's. Well, conscience belongs to God, but people have rendered their conscience to Caesar in supporting these murders. I mean, there's no reason why the military could not have just demanded the surrender of these people in the boats. That's what the Coast Guard was doing. People always surrendered. They didn't fight back. They're not dumb. You got American destroyers there, aircraft carriers there. Little people in a boat are going to fight the U.S. Navy. It's ridiculous. All they had to do was surrender. Say surrender, and they would have surrendered. Bring them back to the United States to stand trial. Now, I question the whole jurisdiction aspect is, who died and made the U.S. government the international, worldwide king enforcing this drug war everywhere. It's absolutely ridiculous. But the point is that that's what they should have done. And then this double tap thing, I'd never heard that expression before now, but some survivors of these boats where they're hanging on the boats, and the U.S. military goes in there and kills these survivors? You're not supposed to do that. Basic rules of humanity say you go in there and you save that person. If you think he's committed a crime, bring him back, which is what they should have done with the people they initially killed. But to kill the survivors? And it shows you that troops will obey orders. I've said this for umpteen years. The troops, they take an oath to support and defend the Constitution, but it's a sham. Their objective, their aim, their mission is to support the President of the United States. That's where their loyalty is. They will obey whatever orders they're issued. And we can see that with attacks on Iran. Every soldier knows that the Constitution requires a congressional declaration of war. And yet, They follow orders to attack Iran. They did the same thing with Iraq. They did the same thing with Vietnam. Troops obey orders. Their loyalty is to the president, the ruler. So this guy comes up with these interesting motivations, but again, the off-kilter part is the fact that he responds to these things, which to me are legitimate grievances he has, in this weird off-kilter way by trying to assassinate the president, thinking he's going to break through all these rings of security and so forth. I mean, the media is making a big deal of how did he get in there? Well, the government's got a legitimate response to that. The guy didn't even get into the ballroom. I mean, he got past at most, I think, one ring of security, and he still had to get through several more rings. I mean, there was never a chance that he was going to succeed in this thing, which shows you how off-kilter the guy is. Not just to even make this strange attempt, but to think that he was going to get away with it is ridiculous. One of the most amazing things in this whole thing, though, is the guy's alive. That's what just shocks me is how did that happen? How did he end up alive and not wounded? He shot one of the security guard, I think Secret Service agent or somebody there. He shot him apparently dead, except the guy had a bulletproof vest, and so he survived. But as far as the killer's concerned, or the would-be killer, he thought he had killed him, and he ends up alive? I don't know how that happened. I mean, I'm just shocked that they didn't just shoot him dead. So this whole thing is a manifestation, I'm convinced, of this massive death-producing machine that we live under. Martin Luther King put it best. This is a violent regime. This is the greatest purveyor of violence. And Americans don't want to come to terms with that. We honor King. We have named the boulevards after him and buildings and so forth. But nobody wants to confront that when he made that statement, did it come to an end with the end of the Vietnam War? I mean, nobody questions that at the time he made it, that it was true, greatest purveyor of violence in the world. But did it come to an end? I don't think so. I think we all would agree that the U.S. government is the greatest killer of people in the world. I mean, when it comes to killing, we're number one. We're far above Russia and China, North Korea, Cuba, all the official enemies, Iran, the official enemies, opponents, competitors, of the U.S. empire. We're number one when it comes to killing. And some people are proud of that. I don't think it's anything to be proud of. Now, there are sometimes humorous aspects in all this, and one of them was provided by President Obama, former President Obama. He called on social media for all Americans to, quote, reject the idea that violence has any place in our society. Duh. But what I don't think he's referring to is the violence of the U.S. national security establishment. I think he's referring to violence in the private sector only, which, as I've said, is a direct consequence of the massive death machine that we live under. But I don't think he's talking about that death machine and the violence it produces in a democracy. Because when he was president, I don't know how many people U.S. forces were killing in Afghanistan during his 8 years in office. But it's got to be like, hundreds of thousands? At least tens of thousands? And then the other places that the U.S. military was killing people? That's a lot of people. But I don't think he's referring to that part of violence in a democracy. Why not? This is what I keep arguing about and contending here at the Future of Freedom Foundation, including in my series, The Evil Within. It's a video series. You can see it in the multimedia section of our website. Is that in order to get what Obama wants, a violent-free society, well, you can never achieve 100%, but to get pretty close to it, you've got to eliminate the evil structures that have attached themselves to the federal government and that were no part of our federal governmental system when the United States got founded and weren't part of our system for over 100 years. And among those is this foreign policy of interventionism, the drug war, the national security state. That was no part of our governmental system. Are you kidding? Our American ancestors would never have accepted the Constitution if it had called into existence a national security state instead of a limited government republic. But he says, well, that's violence has no place in our democracy. Great. What about the violence against those two people in Minneapolis? Well, against lots of people in Minneapolis, but two that they killed, that U.S. officials killed, those ICE officials, Renee Good and Alex Preddy. They're dead. Do you see the U.S. government going after them, prosecuting them? Or the state officials prosecuting them? I don't see it. In fact, I see the exact opposite, trying to protect them after they kill those two Americans. What's that all about? Why didn't Obama condemn that? Why didn't he call for justice? What about when they killed Ashley Babbitt, that unarmed woman in the Capitol during the protests there? You know, that guard just shot her in cold blood. She wasn't doing anything, initiating force against anyone. She was like climbing up to open a window or a transom or a door or something, totally unarmed. The guy just shot her and killed her. Why isn't he being charged? How about it, President Obama? You know, does that kind of violence have any place in a democratic society? I don't think so. Any more than the violence initiated against Renee Good and Alex Preddy or anybody else in America. But this is the problem. This is why I keep arguing in my series, The Evil Within, that we've got these evil systems that have attached themselves to the body politic that bring about massive violence. The greatest purveyor of violence in the world, the U.S. government, including against American citizens. Assassinations, state-sponsored assassinations. You know, is Obama talking about condemning those? I don't see it in his statement. I mean, he could have said, hey, we got to end state-sponsored assassinations, including the foreigners, or wars of aggression, like against Iran, where massive numbers of people, including those little girls in that elementary school that this off-kilter guy referred to. It's horrific. You know, and at least express some remorse for it. Say this has no place in a democratic society, killing little girls in an elementary school, or bombing countries and waging wars of aggression against countries. And I mean, it's just horrible. But in any event, now let me, while we're on the subject though of violence and massive death, we need to move to Iran. I mean, figuratively speaking, I don't think anybody wants to move there right now. But I want to talk about these sanctions, this blockade. Well, beginning first with the sanctions, okay? As you all may know, I have condemned these sanctions against everybody around the world for years and years because they're evil. They're part of what The Evil Within, my series. I talk about that. Because they target the civilian population of a country with death, starvation, illness, and so forth, as a way to get a change of regime in the government. You know, the people will rise up when they're starving to death, or the dictator will have a crisis of conscience and say, oh, I don't want my people to die, I'll get out of here, and then be replaced by a pro-U.S. dictatorship. Well, that's evil. I mean, that's what terrorists do. But look at this blockade. I mean, it's fascinating, this whole situation, because clearly Trump wants out. And as I've said, he's got a tar baby. He never thought it was going to be a tar baby. He thought it was going to be like Venezuela. Just get in there, get a surrender, and get out. And the Iranians have refused to surrender. They've been blasted to smithereens. Their military, their Navy, their Air Force, whatever. Okay, yeah, they've got some missiles left and so forth. But militarily speaking, Trump's right. He won the war. He ought to be coming home. Bring the troops home. But instead, like I've said before, he's bringing the troops in. So it's the only time I've ever seen where a nation has won a war, instead of bringing the troops home, they're sending more troops in. Because he's in a tar baby. And so when Iran put on this blockade, his first reaction was, oh my gosh, there's going to be massive disruption in the world economy. And there already is. We can see that. It hasn't affected the U.S. yet very much. High gas prices, increase in strawberries or raspberries, and some businesses going bankrupt, but nothing like what's going on in other parts of the world. They are really suffering. And my hunch is it's going to domino into the United States at some point. But Trump's reaction at the first, and the national security state's reaction, was let's lift the sanctions on Iran, because Iran was letting its oil ships keep going. And so it was producing some oil through the Straits of Hormuz, and lift the sanctions on Russia oil, because they realize that the more oil that's coming through, the better off the world is. Well, at some point, they changed course, you see. And at that point, Trump could have come home. Just, oh, hey, we won, come home. But the tar baby had him. He couldn't let it go. So he says, well, maybe we'll have to invade the Strait of Hormuz. So they were making plans to invade. You all will recall that. And then they finally resorted to this blockade. The blockade is to blockade all the oil from coming through. So their mindset completely turned 180 degrees. The mainstream press doesn't go into this. It's like, especially the right-wing press, oh, this is all normal. It's just normal. And they start cheering for this blockade. Yay, no oil's getting through. Well, the Pentagon immediately vetoed that plan and said, no, we'll let non-Iranian ships come through. Because they still see, the Pentagon still see, and it's wisdom, that the more oil that's coming through, the better, even if it's not, 100%. But Iran then turns around and says, oh, no, we're not going to play that game. You're not going to stop our ships and let these other ships. We'll continue our blockade against those other ships. So it turns out to be 100% blockade. No oil at all gets through. Well, tiny bit maybe. But what is Trump's and the national security state's objective here, you see? Their objective is the same as it is in Venezuela and Cuba. To stop Iran from garnering any revenue so that the people, the populace, start dying in mass starvation, massive illness. That's what his plan is. This is why Venezuela capitulated. Because they were really on the verge of mass starvation there. They depended on oil, too, for everything. They're a socialist country. And then the same with Cuba. That's why he's got this blockade on Cuba. Because they're threatened now with mass starvation and illness there. Death by illness. And so he wants them to capitulate. Venezuela capitulated. They said, you got us. You got us. And if they hadn't, there would have been massive, massive starvation. Death by starvation. And that's happened in history. And so that's why the U.S. government is now partnering, of all the weird, bizarre, evil, and immoral things, they're now partnering with a socialist communist regime that they've condemned for decades, a narco-terrorist regime. And they're partnering with it, maintaining it in existence, controlling it, running it, and have an obedient, compliant interim president there that's following orders. It's amazing. And that's what's going on with Iran here. And the reason that's so evil is they're trying to target the Iranian people, and the mainstream press doesn't see this, or they don't want to see it. Because it's not like bombing. Oh, when he says, I'm going to obliterate, I'm going to annihilate Persian civilization, with bombs. Everybody went up in arms. Not everybody, not the MAGA crowd. They were cheering. But the mainstream press, oh, this could be a war crime. This could be a war crime. But they don't see that this blockade is the exact same thing. It targets the civilian population. So it's a race against time here. It's very fascinating because Trump says, oh, I got all the time in the world. What he's referring to is that he can outlast the worldwide ramifications of no oil going through the straits. Okay, there'll be bankruptcies, and there might be some deaths along the way and so forth. But he can last that. He's willing to accept that because he thinks that he can beat them to the race for death. That he can bring this crisis situation in Iran, where there's the threat of massive starvation and death facing the Iranian people first. That's just evil. It's just evil to target the population of a country as a way to get regime change or a change in policy. So it's really a question of who's going to win the race. But what I want to point out is the evil and immorality of what's going on here. The blockade is no different from a massive bombing attack. Whether a person dies of starvation, illness because of a blockade, is no different if he dies from a bomb. He's dead either way. And it's just wrong to be targeting an innocent population. And the idea among many Americans is they're just Iranians, Jacob. Their lives don't have the same value as our lives. That's just bull, especially for people who go to church every Sunday. I mean, God has created everybody with equal value. There's no such thing as, oh, well, they're gooks, Jacob. Their lives are not worth as much as American lives. That's just nonsense. I mean, it's absolutely horrific. And you know, I've said this before, but the Iranian people are not my enemy. You know, they haven't destroyed my freedom like the U.S. government has. And that's another thing about these wars that they start here, is they end up destroying our freedom, our privacy, with their surveillance of Americans and their Patriot Acts and their TSA Acts and their out-of-control federal spending and debt and their paper money system and their income tax and tariffs that fund all this status junk. That's what is my enemy. And that's why I keep saying to libertarians, we have to stay focused on how do we achieve a free society here at home. And that's one of the problems with these foreign wars, is that people get distracted. Oh, we got to win, Jacob, got to win. And winning becomes everything, and everybody forgets that our objective as libertarians is to achieve freedom here at home. And who's the destroyer of our freedom? Who's the one preventing us being free? The federal government. Okay? Iran's never done anything to take away our freedom. They've never attacked the United States. From what I understand, they haven't invaded any country in 2,000 years. I could be wrong on that, but I keep reading that in the mainstream press. Or not in the mainstream press, but on the internet among libertarian commentators, that they haven't invaded anybody in centuries. So there's one other thing that I think is kind of funny to comment on. Sometimes, you know, these things bring some humor in all the darkness. But there's a master sergeant that's being charged with making a bet before the Maduro attack, you know, where they killed 100 people there without any kind of remorse or regret or anything, and bringing Maduro to justice for the drug war. The drug war. We got to win the drug war, Jacob, with it. We've been waging for decades and decades. It's the biggest racket. Yeah, I mean, the drug war racket. But this master sergeant knew they were about to attack, so he bets in these betting markets that they're going to take out Maduro and they're going to attack Venezuela, and he makes $400,000 apparently, and he is in crypto, and he tells them shut down my account immediately to hide it, and so they somehow or another figure out that this guy had done this, so they charge him with a crime. Okay, he's a bad person trying to make money off inside information. But then I read an article about the Iran war has drained U.S. supplies of critical, costly weapons. Duh, isn't that a surprise? And you know what that means. So another article. Lockheed Martin CEO has called the Trump administration a golden opportunity for the company. So it's okay for all these defense industry businesses to make billions and billions of dollars from all these weapons that are being used up. Isn't that a surprise that they've emptied them of all these weapons? How are we going to confront China and Russia? They're saying we need to replenish these. And so they're making gobs and gobs of money, not to mention the fact that there's other people in this government making all kinds of money, especially on crypto and stuff. But they go after this master sergeant for making a few bucks on the side with insider information. I'm not defending what he's done. I'm just saying there's a lot of hypocrisy taking place here. Anyway, that's Trump Watch. Thank you all for tuning in. And as always, thank you for your great support of the Future of Freedom Family.